You're listening to The Exchange, and here's your host, Dr. Lorraine.
So I wanted to go into my next question because even though I have not heard this, I know there are some of my friends who have mentioned, ask him about the chair principle.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
explain the chair principle? Because you're going to want to know. So I have no idea what the chair principle is, but I have full confidence in my friends who have said, ask him, Brother Wilson, what it is, and you're going to want to know. It's going to be good. So,
We may have to do a part A and a part B if I go real in depth to it. But the chair principle, I'm so glad you asked because it was a life altering moment for me. And so when I was family pastor for 9 years and then studied counseling, I did all the premarital, marital counseling that a licensed professional counselor would have. I did a lot of the counseling. So I did all the premarital counseling, counseling for marital couples. I've got into counseling for other churches in the area. I don't do any of that anymore. So I refer all that to my wife. But I did a lot of it back then. So I was asked to counsel a couple. I did not know them. And one of their pastors contacted me, and the situation was that the guy had had an affair a little over a year into his marriage. They stayed together for about 3 months. It just wasn't a good situation. Then they separated, and they've been separated for 8 months, living in different towns. Went back to their prospective churches, and so I was asked to meet with them. So I come walking into the office to meet with them. I borrowed an office from someone, and the man comes in and sits down in the couch, and his wife, I'm expecting her to sit down on the couch, maybe at the other end. This is a pretty bad situation. She finds a chair as far away from him as she can get in the office, and I'm sitting in the chair facing him, and she's way over to my right. And so I started asking questions, and the man was crying. He was apologetic. He said, "I sinned. I messed up. I begged my wife for forgiveness. I want to make this work." And I couldn't get her to hardly look up. She just was staring down at the ground. I'd ask open-ended questions. She'd find a way to close them so fast. I mean, very short answers. And after an hour, I didn't feel like I got anywhere. And so that was the end of our first session. We met the following week, and the same exact thing took place. He walks in, out in the couch. She's in the chair, far away from where she can get. And it just wasn't going anywhere. I'm 30 minutes into it. It was just a repeat. And I'm like, God, I don't have training for this. I don't know. Everything that I know to do, I've done. I don't know what to do to help this couple. This is a bad situation. And I prayed. I said, God, give me some direction. And the Lord gave it to me, but it was just like a portion. It wasn't all of it. And I acted on the portion that God gave me. And I stood up and I walked behind the chair I was standing in. And I said, I want you all to imagine there's only one chair in this office. I said, who's going to sit in this chair? And I said, is it you or is it you? And then I walked around and I sat down in the chair and I said, sir, I said, I see you saying, I'll be the one who sits in this chair. And I said, because you're saying I've asked for forgiveness. I've done everything I can do. I've gone back to my pastor. I've done everything, and I'm not moving any further. So you are going to orbit around me. And I got up and I started walking around the chair. And I said, ma'am, I see you saying, I forgave you a long time ago, but I don't trust you. So I'll be the one who sits in the chair. And I sit down in the chair and I said, and you want your husband to orbit around you. And I got up and I walked around the chair. When I got done doing that, I'm sitting behind the chair and this is what happened. I said, dear God, what am I supposed to do next? Because I've never read this, never seen it. And I'm like, what is next? And all of a sudden it just came to me. And I looked at the man. I said, do you love God? He said, yes. I said, do you really love him? Yes. And just like Jesus asked Peter 3 times, I asked 3 times. I said, do you really love him? And he teared up and tears from his face. He said, yes. And I said, I believe you. I said, ma'am, do you love God? And she says, yes. I said, do you really love him? Yes. I said, do you really love him? I looked up and tears started running on her face. It was just a God thing, literally a God thing. I've never used this again in a counseling session at all. But it was just a God thing. And tears flowing down her face. And I'm sitting behind the chair. And this is literally what I did. I clapped my hands and I smiled real big. And I said, congratulations. I said, you guys are going to have an incredible marriage. And they were just looking at me like dumbfounded. And I said, you just told me who's going to sit in the chair. I said, sir, it's not you, and ma'am, it's not you, but instead it's him. God's going to sit in the chair, and together you're going to orbit around him. And then I began to talk to him. What does that look like in practical terms? And I described how he was going to have to build trust. Talk to her about how you're going to have to forgive. And she goes, and she looks up because I paused, and she goes, and forget. And I said, no. I said, God doesn't even forget. And that shocked her because we always say forgive and forget. But he doesn't forgive and forget. He forgives and remembers no more, and remembers no more. And when you look at it in scripture, it's not really talking about that he forgets. It's just saying that he's not going to recall it and use it against us. I said, ma'am, I said, you're always going to know what he did. I said, but you can get to the place where that you never bring it back up and use it for vindictive purposes. Well, today they have a great marriage. They have family. He's involved in ministry. It's just an amazing God thing. Well, years later, I'm sitting in a hotel lobby in Dallas, Texas, and I've got a couple leaders that have flown in from elsewhere. One of them was a Baptist leader, and someone else. So we're working on a nonprofit, and someone says, "Well, what does the flow chart look like?" And I grabbed a piece of paper, a napkin, and I actually drew out a napkin, this circle in the middle of the napkin with these smaller circles all around the outer side of that circle. And I drew little lines, and I put a little arrow in front of one of the circles. I said, this is you, and all around these little circles. And I said, together we are orbiting around the center. And the center is the common purpose and the core values. 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I was teaching this at a church, and I felt led. I was teaching leadership to about 17 leaders in the core leadership meeting. And I felt led to draw this out on a whiteboard. And I drew it out, and the room got really quiet. And then I turned it to the senior pastor, and he walked up and he said, you may have noticed everyone got really quiet, and a couple of people looked at me. He said, the reason is right before COVID, I was praying, God, what do we need to do to move our church forward? And he said, God gave me a vision. And he goes, and multiple people in this room have seen it. He goes, it's on a piece of paper in my office. He said, it's identical to what you just drew out on that board. He went back and showed me this piece of paper, and it's identical to what I drew out on the napkin. Well, lo and behold, after I drew it out on the napkin, a few years later, I actually found it. It exists in corporate America. Mm-hmm. This flow chart of everything being orbiting around the center, being the purpose and the values, is in existence in corporate America. It's not widely known. And so I've taught it over and over again. I call it the chair principle. I'll write a book about it. I've got the notes, everything's there. And I just got to finish writing it. And so the chair principle.
Well, that's pretty cool. Great way to think about it. A visual also, because you have a visual in your head to think that if we can just get ourselves, our vision, our mission, just centered around God. And if we can just orbit around it instead of thinking that everything else is supposed to revolve around us, that if we revolve around him and around his purpose together as a united body, then we can make some things happen. We can make some real things happen.
So I believe it. I believe it. I believe it. I believe it.
So I love that. I love that. I'm glad I asked. I had no idea what it was about, but I'm so glad I asked.
Well, it fits so well with what we're talking about. And it has become foundational in how everything I do and how I think. So.
Yes. And the principle and the, what it really is about, what leadership is about, and how if we can be good leaders, but we make sure that we know where the source is and what the purpose is and what the mission is.
Amen.
That, we can be successful.
That's the core of everything we're talking about. Absolutely.
Or yes.
Practical things and all the other things, but you've got to understand that the center, you've got to understand it and align with it, and the rest of it, it'll make sense then. It'll make sense why you use this personality profile, which is what we use, but you can use others. It makes sense while you use job descriptions and ministry covenants. It makes sense why you would do an evaluation. It's because you're not trying to build something to, for size and numbers. You're about changing lives. And the only way to truly change life is that you got to get people aligned with God's agenda.
Right.
And then when you expound on that beyond, then as different ministries and companies, organizations, you better know what your purpose is, and you better align with your values. And all of that adds up to creating culture. I mean, culture is becoming a buzzword, but the simplest definition of culture is personality. It's the personality of a church, personality of an organization. And so what are the essential elements or the key elements in culture? Well, it's values. And so you got to know the reason why. That's your purpose. And you got to know the how. And the how is about values. And so the why, purpose, how, values, because values are lived out in your behavior. Mm-hmm. So you want to know what someone values? Just watch their behavior. And so I've seen people say, oh, I value teams. I value this. And then they're short with other people. They're smart aleck with other people. And people down like, no, you don't value that. You value your opinion. Mm-hmm. You don't value teams, or you value self-preservation. No one's going to talk down to you. No one's going to hurt you. That's not a bad value, but that cannot override teams if you're a part of a team. So evidently you don't want to be a part of a team. You just need to go do your own thing because you're pretty short with people. And you override people, and you don't really care about people. You care about yourself. So rather than say that you care about teams, forget the teams. Just be about you. And so I can get really blunt with all this if I need to.
This is all good. I appreciate it. And I'm actually wanting to go into my next question, which makes perfect is going into this kind of segueing is about personality types, because there are very different personality types that we have to kind of consider when making up a team. So my question is there a personality type that does best with leadership responsibilities?
Ultimately, no. Every president of the United States, I say every president of the United States, every personality type can be found. You can find presidents of the United States that exemplify those personality traits. The Apostle Paul, if you use the DISC model, DISC, the Apostle Paul would have been a dominant driver. The Apostle Peter would have been an inspiring influencer. You would have Moses would be a steady supporter, and Timothy would have been a cautious contemplator. The dominant driver, opinionated, get to the point, quit telling all these stories. Give me a quick survey. I can make a decision. Let's move forward. We're wasting time but not do anything. And Paul demonstrated that, like, I'm going to go here. The Holy Ghost, no, well, I'll go here. And this one thing I do, I press. He's very much of a dominant driver. He doesn't mind opposing the Apostle Peter. He marches right into Jerusalem. He's not one of the original 12, but he marches right into Jerusalem and opposes the Apostle Peter. So he's a dominant driver. The Apostle Peter, both big picture people, and he's a big picture person, but yet he is inspiring. He's animated. He's like, we'll do this, we'll do that, but he doesn't have a whole lot of the discipline. He's people oriented. He's not task oriented. Paul was task oriented. Apostle Peter is people oriented. And then you've got Moses, who's like the Apostle Peter, in that he's also people oriented, but he's not big picture. He is very much about details. And so steady supporters make up the largest percentage of the population, and steady supporters, they want to take care of everything and help everyone and be supportive of everyone. Well, that's what Moses did, to the extent that he tried to be the number one counselor of 1 million plus people. I mean, he killed himself. He's actually praying, God, let me die, because of the load, but that's a steady supporter. So he was a great leader. But he had to, adjust. The Apostle Peter, some great things, but he had to adjust. Apostle Paul, the same thing. And then, of course, the cautious contemplator, black, white, no shades of gray. It's rules, and you got to abide by those rules. And I'm not going to take your word. We're going to make sure that this is accurate. And there you have the Apostle Thomas, and incredible people. And so on a team, you need all these different aspects. I tend to be an inspiring influencer. My secondary trait would be that of a dominant driver, and that's a learned behavior over the last decade plus, trying to make things happen and move forward. My wife is a cautious contemplator, which means that we have nothing in common. Because I'm big picture people, she's details, tasks, but together we make a great team. And so when I'm at moving forward with things, so like TBC, I stepped in. I'm just now starting my 3rd year, so I've been there for 2. I was trying to build a team. Well, I'm looking for someone that can help me, like my executive assistant, who is a cautious contemplator or steady supporter, and she has both traits. She's incredible, but she's got skill sets that I don't have, and very, very thankful for that. So I don't need a whole lot around me that's inspiring influencer, because I'm an I. Not that we don't have that on the team, but I'm just saying that's not my personal. I don't need that. I need some people that are S's and C's and I's, or D's, I should say. So when I look for and building a team, I'm always trying to get people to understand that, okay, if you're a C, you may need someone to help paint the big picture for you. And so you're trying to team people up. At the church, we've done the same thing. We now make it a requirement at the church that if you're going to be involved in leadership, you have to take the DISC personality. And then if you step in and lead in particular ministry, okay, well then you need to build around you and your team, and you need to look for someone that complements. And so then we look for, where is the stage of the organizational life cycle? Is it thriving, or is it a place where you need to build? Do we need an entrepreneur? Well, entrepreneurs are usually D's and I's. Mm-hmm. And so you need an entrepreneur. Do you need someone who can just make it steady and just continue moving forward, just plodding along, because everything's, you don't want to mess anything up, it's just be there and be supportive? Well, you might be able to use an S in leadership. And so you're always looking at the variety, look at the personalities. God, our temperaments, some people call them temperaments. And but just looking at God gave that. God created us those ways. And so, but understanding that can make a big difference in leadership.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think that there are some teams that are like, we want to get everybody that thinks like us, that does the same thing like us, because we want us all to be on the same page. When in reality, if you get all the people that think like you, then there's going to be a lot of things that are missing. So if you've got a lot of people that have big visions and have, these big ideas, but then you don't have anybody on your team that knows how to follow through. Right. Then it's just a big idea. It's just this really big idea, and you're just like, yeah, but who's going to actually make it happen on the day-to-day? Right. And make sure that all the details, the dates are being met and everything. And so sometimes having somebody who's kind of your opposite in some sense may be a little bit uncomfortable because they don't think like you, but that's actually like a good thing. I think people sometimes forget, no, that's a good thing, because if we're not like each other, that means that we're going to be able to do different things, and we're going to be able to accomplish the goal that we need to accomplish together.
Which means that you have to have self-awareness. Mm-hmm. You understand where your strengths reside and where your weaknesses are. And if you don't know that, the best way to find that out is by listening to people around you. But if you have a poor self-image, you're going to really struggle with that, because you're not going to allow yourself to hear constructive criticism, and you're going to shut that down. You're not going to create a safe place for people to speak, and you become very limited. It doesn't mean that you can't be effective. You can be effective, but your effectiveness will not be at the level it could be without allowing the other to be built around you. So I've noticed that some of the greatest leaders are leaders that are very comfortable with who they are, and they understand their weaknesses, and they just build people around them that have those strengths. And that's how that's how I try to lead as much as possible, because I've seen it demonstrated, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I love that you have people that you are working with or on your team in the church that they are asked to, if they're going to be involved, to take part in that personality, the discs, because that really does help you to understand, help themselves, first of all, be aware, like you said, be aware of who they are and what they do and what their strengths, and also be able to have church leadership understand, okay, this person has this gift, this person has this gift, this would make a really great person to be on this team for greeters or Sunday school or whatever, the task is, instead of kind of maybe having them for a while and then realizing, oh, they're not quite fit out.
We've made enough mistakes through the years that we know that there's a lot of value in doing the disc. So, and there's others out there. The disc is, empirical research shows that disc is number 2 most effective. Social styles, when I looked at it a couple of years ago, social styles was number 1. Disc was number 2. It's very similar to colors. I just like it that you can have the blend with the disc. Colors, you can't really have the blend, and you're just limited to the 4. But it's cool. Colors is great. I love hearing it. I've been in seminars and listened to it. I wouldn't mind being certified in it. But disc is very, very effective. It's about as double effective as Myers-Briggs personality. And we're talking 2 years after it has been taught, people being able to retain and utilize it. That's what they say is how the disc is most effective. So, of course, the Enneagram is a big deal now. I just never remember all the numbers. My daughter says, everybody thinks you're a 7, Dad, but I think you're a 4 wing 5 when you're healthy. And I'm like, I thought I was healthy right now. I don't know what I am. But when she reads it, I'm like, yeah, I think that's me. And we have a lot of fun with it. But this is one thing I think is so important. It doesn't put somebody in a box. it just helps you understand that when a person is demonstrating this type of traits, this is the best way to communicate with them. This is the best way to react. And when you can understand that, at any given moment, I might be a C sometime. And I am. There's sometimes when I'm writing, I can become very analytical, very much, in a creativity mode, melancholy. It would be a C. I can get there. And so when I'm in that mode, you may not want to come and be an I around me right now because you're probably going to drive me nuts. When I'm in a D mode and I'm ready, let's go, go, go. You're asking all these questions and slowing me down is driving me crazy. And so I have to recognize that and go, okay, wait a minute. I'm talking to a seed right now. They're not trying to be rude. They're not trying to be ugly. They just have questions. Slow down, answer their questions. Don't be the dominant driver right now. And all those things help me lead better. And then when you can recognize people, I walked into rooms and taught leadership at a church and didn't know anybody, really know the senior pastor, never had seen his wife before, never have seen some other leaders. 1 hour of teaching about values. We're using sticky notes. We're putting them on the wall. I then started teaching DISC, and I said, before you reveal your results of your assessment, I said, let me tell you what I think each one of you are. And I went around the room and I had every single person. I knew this one was a D, this one was an I, this was a C, which meant that now I not only know how they operate and I understand them, but now I appreciate what they bring to the table. And if I don't understand, then I cannot appreciate. And so sometimes we get frustrated at people when we really should be appreciating what they bring to the table, but we don't understand it because we don't utilize the tools like DISC.
Mhm. Well, one of the things I know you said that you also attended Jackson College of Ministries, and I did too. Towards the tail end, but Brother Kai Larson, before he passed, that was a couple of years before he passed. That was one of the things that he had us do in our class, and to this day, knowing that I am melancholy and choleric, and understanding my personality type has kind of been something that has gone with me, remained with me for the rest of my life. Understanding what that means, and how that has kind of helped me to understand me. So I think that that's great, just having that awareness and then being able to build a team and know how to respond. So I am going to go into my next question, and I wanted to ask, what is the best way to develop individuals into leaders? Because once you understand what their personality type and once you know kind of where they're at, then from there, as a leader, what is the best way to develop leaders or young leaders or anybody that is wanting to participate in leaders in the church and wants to grow?
Thank you for asking that question. I had someone just within the last 2 weeks set appointment and talk with me, and they wanted to know basically what you're asking. And they were driving at the fact, what is the material? What is the book? What is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, steps and all. And I pointed them some direction with some of that. I said, the number one thing that you can do is create a culture in which you celebrate growth. And so a culture, again, going back to the personality of a organization or a personality of a church. And so that culture has got to be one in which it's got the values for growth. And so again, culture, as I stated earlier, consists largely of values. And so values are lived out in behavior. So you create a culture for it. So I'll give you an example of some things that we have done at the Pentecostals of Katy and talking about growth and creating a culture of growth. Well, we have a ministers in training class every Sunday. We have years of material to teach, but it's not about the material that is taught in this class. It's the culture for the growth. We have a safe environment. We allow people to try things, make mistakes, get up and try it again. And so an example of that is we have Sunday night service, Sunday night, man, our choir is singing. It's a big deal. But on Sunday night, we'll turn around and periodically we will have 7, 8 speakers get up and they preach 5 minutes each. And it seems like old school, but we're doing this on a Sunday night. Some of them are 16 years old. Some of them are a little older that had never public spoke before. We've had them get up and make mistakes. I mean, get up and and it's just little things, and we'll go back and we'll teach, and then we'll give them another opportunity to try it again. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus would demonstrate it, he would teach it, and then he sends them out. They come back, oh, we couldn't cast the demon out, what are we supposed to do now? And he went back into teaching again. But it's a safe environment for people to fail. And so all of those things are cultural elements. We're big on serving, and so we use tools. We give out a towel, like, everyone's got to find a place to serve, but we don't beat people with a brow. If they start in one ministry and like, oh, I don't think this is going to work, they check out and go into another one. We celebrate it, and we're not like, oh, you quit, you quitter. We're like, no, man, you tried it. Let's try another one. And so we create this culture of which we're just trying to grow people, and it permeates all the way down throughout the church to where that the singers that lead worship, many of them started off leading worship in children's church. And in preteen, they were playing the keyboard. We have people playing the keyboard right now in preteen that last year at 12 years old played in our main service.
Wow.
I mean, played and tore it up. Incredible. Singers, the same way. Speakers. We have a Christian school. They get up, they preach. They preach. They're 10, 11 years old. They're getting up, they're speaking. And so you just create a culture in which people are celebrated because they tried. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you've got people that are growing leaps and bounds. And then there are the practical things. Ministry covenants, or what a lot of people call job descriptions, a very practical tool to give some parameters and say, okay, this is what we're expecting out of you. We'll teach in the ministers in training. We even have a junior ministers in training class for juniors, and we will teach. Here's how you speak. Here are things you need to do when you're praying with someone in the altar. This is what you do when you go to the hospital. And so a lot of practical things. This is how you memorize scripture. This is how you memorize names. I still don't have that one down well. This is how you, and we'll do a lot of practical things. But it's not the lesson, it's the environment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's really great. And I think sometimes we tell people, I hear it all from the pulpit, God can use anybody, God can use you, God wants to use you. But who are the people that were given the opportunity to be used, or given the opportunity to practice what they're using?
Amen.
Do we only use the young men? Do we only use, the certain people that are of a certain age?
Yeah.
Do we only use, but creating the culture of, we use the young women and we use the young men and the young and the old, and no matter where you are, if we say that God can use you, then we mean everybody.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you make a mistake, I love that. If you make a mistake, you know what? That's okay. Keep going, or maybe that's not for you. Maybe there's something else that God has called you to, and this is your.
We had one of our, and he's just turned in the early 30s, and he's a great guy, but he'll get up and every now and then he'll mess something up. He was up a couple of years ago, and he said, make sure you're here at this Friends Sunday. He said, this could be the service that when your son finds a husband and your daughter finds a wife. And all of a sudden, everybody goes like that. He goes, no, wait a minute. And we laughed and laughed, and he just, but we love him, no one's like, you're never going to get back up there again and speak. It's like, no, get back up there next Sunday. Let's do this again. And I could go through a lot of other stories. They're funny, and but anyway, I could go on and on. But safe environment to try things, and then there's only so much pulpit time, so
Right.
not just about the pulpit in the main sanctuary, but it's the pulpit at the nursing home. It's the one out knocking doors, and so we celebrate all those people. And there's not like, oh, this is more important than this other. No, we're all involved. And so we got people involved in ministries all over. I'd say probably close to 60-something% of our church, including, this is on the Sunday attendance. That would be the proof of people. I'd say about 60% are involved in a ministry somewhere, and normal about 20%. So we're about 3 times above the norm.
Well, I really love that. My church too is a lot of we have several daughter works throughout the city, And, you're going to find me playing the piano at the bilingual church, on Thursdays. I'm probably not going to play at the main service, and that's okay. But, I get to play and help and be
Awesome.
used on that side of church. But it's really wonderful because, I'm still the piano player.
Yep.
I may not be able to do it at the main service. He's incredible, talented, but it's like everybody has their place that they can do something.
Amen.
You know what? If I mess up, it's okay. They still love me. They're like, it's all right, Sister Lorraine, that was so good, but just a place of growth, a place
Yep.
of like safe
Amen.
place of growth, of just like, encouraging. We appreciate everything that you're able to do, which obviously makes me very happy and thankful and makes me keep wanting to go,
Yep.
because if they were to be like, that was terrible, oh my goodness, then I'd be like, I'm never coming back,
Oh, I love it. I
I
love it.
but that's not how it is. And so I'm thankful for the appreciativeness of anything that we can give, and also the good feedback. The just the like, yes, thank you. We appreciate what you do in ministry. And so that building that culture, as you said, to be a safe space of like, it's okay. We didn't even hear that mess up. It's all right. It's all good.
I think we all need to be encouragers.
Hmm.
Encouragers. And when you transition, and leadership is always transitioning. um I keep using this term the last couple of months, is that I'm a temporary. Every leader is just serving temporarily. Someone will take your place. And
Right.
so in that, you have to keep in mind that what is my role in serving in this time frame? Well, I need to be faithful. I need to
Hmm.
be faithful. I need to be a good steward. I need to move things forward as much as I can. But as I'm doing all those things, I need to be an encourager, because someone's going to come after me, and I need to encourage. I need to encourage. Moses is still amazing. Moses, in the transitioning, turning things to Joshua, the Lord had to tell him, go and encourage. He had to tell him repeatedly, go and encourage, because Moses knew how to be the critic, but he didn't know how to be the encourager.
Hmm.
And I think that in everything you're talking about, creating the safe place and environment, and you're training, you're developing people, you've got to be an encourager. You can't always say, here's your mistakes, and point out all the mistakes. You've got to be an encourager, because you're raising up the next generation. And one of the best ways is, I mean, they get up and they're young, and the context that they're preaching from is not that great, but an encourager. I needed encouraged last night. Last night I spoke at a men's rally. I text my wife when I sit down on the front row after it was over. They were giving out some door prizes. I sit down on the front row and grab my phone and had my head down. And I text my wife and I said, it was absolutely horrible. I said, it was horrible. And then I was like, and I'm prideful to even say that it was horrible. I said, I can't help it. I just feel like it was horrible. And yet I had people just like, man, and text me even this morning, and how that I was listening, and that was a God word for me. And on and on. So, at the end of the day, I think we all need encouragement, and we
Yeah.
all need to be encouragers.
Yes. And one thing that I did learn, I remember I was at the Deborah Project one year, and Sister Bernard was leading this ladies kind of thing. And we're talking about being a leader and how you deal with people that are in your youth group. And I remember Sister Rachel Calthorpe saying that for every negative thing that you say to somebody, or criticism or something, correction, that you have to invest 10 good things into their life. Say 10 positive things, because the negative things are the things that people hear the most, or that they're the damaging, they're the ones that they hold on to. But if you can invest at least 10 good interactions, then that one maybe correction, or even just criticism, or not even maybe criticism, just helping to turn them in the right direction, that it's not going to be as terrible as if all you do is deposit in these negative things and these criticisms. People aren't going to take it so well, and it just becomes something that they create internally for themselves and carry, because as human beings, that's who we are. We often dwell more on the negative than the positive, even though there's so much more positive than there is the negative. So having an understanding of that as a leader is a really big thing, to be able to be a good leader.
Well said. Well said.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that you're like, we need to be encouragers.
Yes.
So
I
be
am with you.
encouragers.
Oh,
Encouragers as a leader.
I encourage you, Dr. Lorraine. You're doing good. You're
Thank you.
doing well with this podcast. It's going to grow. It's going to make a difference.
So
Love it.
I wanted to go into my another question before I kind of lose my train of thought again. What is the best leadership structure that can be put in place in a church?
I go back to, I used that term a while ago, job descriptions, ministry covenants. One thing I didn't talk about was the need for evaluations. And I need to back up and just stress that the majority of churches, the median average size church in America is 60 people. That's pre-COVID numbers. Not we are 74 on that average. It's actually the median average, and it's 60. The average size church in America, and median would be if you add all the church, line all the churches up, you pick the middle church, of the smaller and the large. So that's 60. And the average size church in America would be right at 186 people. And I'm in meetings and I talk and I teach and I'm teaching with the leaders and I ask how many of you have job descriptions, and there's very few churches have them. And they'll say they understand. I understand the importance, but they've never implemented them. They never move forward, and yet leaders get frustrated because people aren't doing what they expect, but they've never laid out the expectations. So job descriptions are paramount. I mean, they're so needed. And the second thing would be, especially for leaders, is evaluations. And evaluation is a tool that enables you to mentor people. It's a mentoring conversation. It's not, oh, this is your job performance. It's not a job performance base. It's really about what are your goals for next year? Where are you headed next year? Do you have those goals on the calendar? Is there an action plan? How did you do on the action plan from last year? What would you do different? And then you're mentoring, you're coaching, as opposed to like, man, they're just not moving this thing forward. This needs to change. And now you're going to have the tough conversation with someone, the confrontational conversation that can be tough and it can be offensive to someone. But when you understand that this is just part of the process, then it becomes exciting and you want to have those evaluations. We have created such a culture right now at POK with evaluations. We have people coming to us asking for their evaluation. Hey, I haven't had my evaluation yet. Can I have my evaluation? And so it's a positive thing. It's really a cool time. And so those are just some basic tools. And so bringing some kind of a structure organization is very important. Along with that, monthly meetings, weekly meetings for some. A lot of times things just get lost. They fall through the cracks just because, and we say, well, we have a communication issue. Well, no, a lot of times you just have a structure issue because you never met, you never had the conversation. And so one of my favorite books by Patrick Lencioni, and again, he's not a Christian writer, he's writing business, but he writes this book called Death by Meeting. And he's not saying that we're going to die in meetings. He was just saying if you don't have enough meetings with the right purpose, then you're going to kill your organization. And so he goes into the different types of meetings you should have, and it's extraordinary. I love it. I want to understand it better and better and apply it better. And so those are some simple things, but bringing some structure, organization, and surprising if you'll listen to the C's and S's, they can help you make it happen. D's and I's, man, they'll mess up structure and the details, but those S's and C's, they get it. And so it's back to working together as a team, helping to pull together the right kind of structure and have an agenda. All those things are basic for me now. I don't even think about it. It just happens. It's almost like breathing. But back in the day, when I first started, they were all revolutionary to me because I'd never seen anything like it. And I have to remind myself, I think a lot of people don't know that, they don't see that. And so when they hear me say these things, again, they're thinking, oh, that's a lot of work to put that together. And they don't understand the value of it. They don't understand the culture that it creates. Right. And so that's my new book, The Leadership Famous. Actually, 5 Reasons Churches Thrive. And I basically talk about those very things and how to bring that about in the culture. So
Well, I have one more question to ask you, and then I want you to tell me about all of the books that you've written so people will know where to get them. But one of my friends asked me and said, this is something that I want to know, so please ask. And are there any tips, and I know you've kind of touched on a little bit in the beginning, are there any tips that you can give to those who are going through a leadership transition in their church? Because as you've said, you're probably not going to be there forever. No matter who you are, what you are, eventually, God is going to call you home, or God's going to call you in a different direction, or somebody else is going to step in. But for those churches who are maybe going through a leadership transition of a pastor or a youth pastor, what are some of the practical things that you would say would be helpful in that time of transition?
Well, from both the person transitioning out, the person transitioning in, and those that are being affected by the transition, the number one thing is be an encourager by far. Along those lines, and this has got to be driven largely by the person's transitioning in and out, is that you've got to create open and honest communication, and that takes a lot because you have to have both people have to be very open and willing to have that open conversation. But trust is so important. You can't really get too far with anywhere without having trust. But trust comes through having open and honest conversation. And that takes time. It takes time getting to know one another, understanding the difference of personalities. You can have an open conversation with the dominant driver pretty easy. As far as just being open. Now, you got to be careful because if that person is not has some insecurities, they can turn around and crush you. But once you develop that trust between each other, you can have a very open conversation with the dominant driver. But a cautious contemplator, you may need to be careful in how you choose your words. You can crush them, and so you'll hurt people. So understand this personality differences, and then creating that trust is a really, really big deal. Man, there's so much talking about transitioning. I'm actually writing right now, I'll have it done by the end of this year, a book called Next Level Leader. And I'm talking about when you step into new things and what's going to happen. And this could be any level. I mean, even right now in my 50s, stepping into a new position and being president of school, I'm in that transition of a next level leader. And so I'm writing a lot about these things. I talk about one of the chapters that I'm actually writing right now. I'll be working on it. When we get done with this podcast, I'll start working on it again. I'm trying to get it done hopefully in the next week or two. But I'm writing about don't crush the critic.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to criticize. You're going to hear criticism. Right. And the worst thing you can do is crush the critic. On the flip side of all that is beware of flattery. And because flattery is one of the top reasons why CEOs get fired, is because they know they need to make changes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the new CEO. They know they need to make changes, know they move forward, and yet people would resist change. So they will use flattery to try to keep you from making the changes that you need to make. And it's a failure within CEOs. And it's empirical research. It's an amazing article. So I'm going to be writing about that after I get done with this chapter. And so there's just a lot of little things. Managing chaos, being expandable is really big. And so anyway, I've got 15 chapters. I won't bore you with all the details, but there's a lot there in the transition. But at the top of the list, being an encourager, developing trust, understanding the personality differences. I see a lot of transitions in churches, and it is a tough time because people are being used to one leadership style, and now there's a new one. And understanding the personality difference is humongous. And not only understanding, but appreciating. You have to appreciate and understand and appreciate. Big deal. I've had people in nice sized churches and the change took place, and all of a sudden the leadership's in their dominant driver. And I've had people with tears rolling off their face, going like, I'm trying to serve. I don't know if I can handle this much longer. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, you know what? You need to understand and appreciate. And when they do, it's amazing how the shift begins to take place. And now they love that leader and they get along great. And there's a lot of great things, but you really have to appreciate those differences.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Dr. Wilson. I appreciate all of the insight that you have given us. I could think like we could probably do a part 2, part 3, because there's so many great things, so many other things that I would ask. But I think we're gonna end the podcast and maybe have you on at a later time, just because of time's sake, and because I know there's a lot of stuff and you've got other things that you've got to do. But I wanted to, before we end and before we give on some closing remarks, where can you get the books? And I know how many books have you written so far?
I think 8. It's hard for me to remember all the, I think it's 8 right now. Yeah. So I
Okay.
realigned was the first one, required reading
Right.
for general license. 70 was the second. That's required for ordinations. Both of them translated to English. Well, they're written in English, translated to Spanish, French, and recently Mandarin.
Oh,
70 is in Mandarin. And so then I wrote Leading Growth. And then after Leading Growth, I wrote Rodent. And that's the rodent running on the spinning wheel, but he's not going anywhere. And sometimes we're busy and we think we're going somewhere because we're busy, but we're not really going anywhere. We don't have our purpose. And so I made up the word, took the rodent running and productivity, combined it together and called it rodentivity. And the definition is thinking that to be busy is to be productive, and it's not. And then I wrote Rhythm, which is actually how to get things done. And then after Rhythm, the difference maker. The difference maker is 7 key principles on making a difference. Probably my personal favorite. It's just straight from my heart, no references, no sites. It's just straight from my heart. And then I co-wrote um, uh, the spiritually healthy leader,
okay.
and then the new one that's come, and that's all about some practical things on being spiritually healthy as a leader. And then the new one coming out is the 5 reasons churches thrive. And now I'm finishing up um, uh, what I call it a while ago. My mind just went blank about being the next level leader. And that'll be done by the end of this year. Next year, my wife and I are going to co-write a couple books together that we've been working on. I've got another one that going to be working on with my son. I'm waiting for him to finish his Master's of Divinity. So I've got a stack of about 7 more books and 7 to 8 more books in the works. Most of them have a lot of research already compiled. I just need to sit down and start writing. I did write 70 for business leaders. I wrote that, and it's ready to be published. We're just waiting for the right time to pull the trigger. The books can be found at Pentecostal Publishing House.
Okay.
You can also get the ebook at Pentecostal Publishing House. You can find it on Amazon. And then multiple of the books are on Audible, and some of the older ones, Realigned and 70, were written almost about 10 years ago. Both of them are now being put on Audible. And so they continue to move forward. So I'm very, very thankful. Thank
All
you for
right.
asking.
So yes, the audiobooks and then Amazon, I know I've seen them, and then Pentecostal Publishing House. So you've got all those books and then more books that will be coming later next year with your wife and your son. So those are all really wonderful projects. I know the next one that I really want to get is about the healthy leader, the spiritual healthy leader. That's another one. I mean, there's so many of them. I want to get them all, but in my line of stuff, in counseling and stuff, I think that's going to be the next one. But eventually I will get to all of them. But I appreciate all the work that you have put into just helping pastors and leaders in our organization to reach their full potential. And in doing so, it benefits the church, it benefits the work of the Lord. So I
Dr.
appreciate
Moran.
that. I appreciate that so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add in closing before we end the podcast? Anything you'd like to say to our
Yes.
listeners about leadership
Yes.
or anything at all?
I do have one thing I want to add. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for asking me to join in. I love, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it. I love making a difference. I try to make a difference. I love talking about leadership, and I give honor to all of your listeners, and just keep growing. I mean, I was that home missions pastor pushing a lot more, saying, God, I want to make a difference. Tears running down my face, and frustrated. And I could be speaking to someone right now that's frustrated and wondering how am I ever going to get moved forward. And you can do it. You can do it. Just don't give up. Just keep moving forward. Don't quit. Don't turn back in the day of battle. And you'll get there. If God spoke it, God said it, God will bring it to pass. And it may take years, and a lot of it very frustrating. I've been there. I know what it's like to go for years of frustration and feeling as though I'll never get there, never get this out. But what's inside of me, I feel like I've got to share it. I've got to do something with it. And then just watch God start pulling pieces together. And it's just an amazing journey. I'm so thankful. And so thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be able to share to your audience.
Thank you, Dr. Eugene Wilson. It has been a pleasure. And to all of our listeners, we hope to tune in for you to tune in soon to the next season of the Exchange podcast. God bless everybody.